told me it was a one-time thing. Little did she know I was going to destroy her entire life. Hello, people of Reddit. Today I'll share my experience as to how I lost the best thing that ever happened to me just because of my greed and my desire to get something better than what I already had. I hope that my experience makes everyone realize to value the relationships they have and to not seek something else. I, female. 26, was married to my ex-husband, male, 28, for 2 years. We got married straight after college. My ex joined a corporate job with a high package while I became a housewife. Me and my ex-husband met in college. We had different courses, but a common group of friends. It brought us closer, and ultimately we started dating. It wasn't meant to be anything serious. We both were just testing waters at that time, but as we spent more time in each other's company, we fell in love and decided to get married. Our marriage life was going as well as it could. My ex had to work long hours because it was his job after getting graduated, and he was set on making a name for himself. I had told him that I'll support him in his dream in every way I can. We were young, and everything felt doable in the initial phase of the marriage. I thought that it wasn't a big deal if my husband had to work late hours at work. I tried to be an understanding wife, but failed miserably. I used to keep scrolling Instagram. People my age were partying with their partner. Someone was going on a trip, whereas I was in the kitchen waiting for my husband to get back home. It started to get to me. I told my ex-husband that we can also take a break and go on some vacation, but he would tell me that we will go just later. At that point, he had too many responsibilities. He promised me that he will do everything to get rich. We had a good home. We were still paying the debt. We had a decent living, it's just that we were really poor, but we weren't Porsche rich, and my ex-husband wanted to get to that level. He had told me in college itself that he wants to become a really big man. I thought that since I was in love with him, it would be easy to support him and be there with him while he worked a life he really wanted. I was going to enjoy the benefits of luxury life as well with him. Turned out that doing that wasn't really easy. We were recent college graduates at that point of time. Everyone was enjoying life and showing it off on their social media handles. I would get jealous of them enjoying their life, but then try to let that feeling go. This started affecting our married life as well. My ex-husband would come late after work, and then I would start telling him whatever I saw on social media about our friends and stuff. 2 things happened after that. Either he would ignore what I was telling him, or he would just make some small vague comment about it like, "Oh, okay," and all. I would get irritated by his reaction and start fighting with him. He was already tired, and then when I started fighting with him, he would get really mad. We stopped talking to each other for many days, and then started talking again when our anger was gone. I felt like he wasn't seeing the sacrifices that I was making for him. I wanted him to value it and appreciate me. I told him the same thing when we were having an argument one day. He got really upset and told me that he did see my efforts, but I was forgetting that whatever he was doing was for our future only. I didn't like the way we fought, but there was no other option left for me. I was frustrated and felt trapped inside our house and in that marriage. My ex and I started getting distant with each other. When I think about it now, the distance was caused partially because of me, but at that point I thought that it was his fault. I was upset at him for not removing the gap between us. Our fight didn't decrease. I would keep telling him how he has changed after marriage and all, whenever I said that all. He would get really angry and then stomp out of the house, shutting the doors, with so much more that it felt like the door was going to break. We started speaking less with each other. Every time we spoke, it was either something related to the house or something that had to be done. I felt even more frustrated as I felt that I was making all these great efforts for my husband's success, and we aren't even happy with each other even after that. Days went like these, and we didn't even talk to each other properly. I was upset that he didn't try to talk to me. Suddenly one day he started talking to me over dinner. He told me that there was some work event and he would like to be there with him. It was sort of an office party. He smiled at me and I smiled back at him. We were finally going to a party, even though it was work-related, and I was really excited. The day of the party, I went to get my nails and hair done. It was long overdue anyway, and this seemed like a good day to go for that. I got ready and left for the party with my husband. It was quite a nice party. The venue was great, and the decorations were on point as well. It was at the rooftop of some 5-star hotel and had a very nice view of the city. I loved being there. For the first time, I was doing something fun. My husband then introduced me to everyone. He had colleagues who were all his age. Everyone was polite. I finally met his boss at that party. When my husband introduced us, I just kept staring at him. He was a very attractive man, slightly older than my husband, but really good on the eyes. He smiled at me and then asked my husband how he was able to spend so much time at work when had such a pretty wife at home. My eyes widened at his statement. He was complimenting me. My husband just smiled at him and told him that I was an understanding wife. I felt a bit of guilt then. I hadn't been understanding at all. I thought that I'll do better from that day onwards. We met more people and had drinks with his colleagues. Everything was going great. There was only one thing. I caught his boss staring towards us more times than one. I thought to myself that it couldn't be a coincidence that every time I looked in his direction, he was looking at me. I ignored that feeling in my stomach and tried to enjoy the party. The party was great. We came back around midnight and both were so tired that we immediately fell asleep. The next day, my husband got busy with his work again. Even though I had decided to be more understanding of each work, it wasn't coming to me. I just felt irritated and upset, but I didn't fight with him again. Days passed like this again. I wasn't really happy, but I made sure that we were civil to each other. It was one afternoon that my husband called for dinner and told me that his boss was coming home for dinner that evening. I asked him why suddenly. I didn't know he was going to invite him that day. He told me it was a Friday night and they were casually talking and his boss mentioned something about having homemade food in the city, so he invited him. He told me that it would have been if he hadn't. I agreed with him and asked him what I should cook. He told me that he will be home early to help me out and that he can pick whatever I need from the grocery store. After the call ended, I started cleaning up the house and all. I started preparing for dinner. My husband came in when I was in the kitchen. He helped me out in the kitchen and then told me that I can go get ready while he'll be here. I nodded at him. I wasn't going to meet his boss in sweatpants. I couldn't decide what to wear. For some reason, I wanted his boss to find me pretty. It was entirely illogical and made no sense, but I wanted that. I got ready and even did some makeup. It was like a no makeup look. When I went down, the boss had already arrived. He was sitting in the living room with a flower bouquet in his hands. He saw me and got up and gave me the bouquet. I was really impressed by him. He was really attractive and charming as well. I smiled at him, and he gave me a smile which seemed flirtatious, but then I thought I was making things up. We had dinner together. He kept telling me constantly that he really liked the food. My husband was happy with that. His boss then told me that I had to give him my recipe for the apple pie because it was really delicious. I told him sure, and then we exchanged numbers so that I can share the recipe with him. The evening went smoothly and he soon left. My husband thanked me for arranging everything so quickly, and I told him it was no problem. We then cleaned up everything and then headed for bed. My husband had to leave for work early the next morning, so slept immediately. I was awake and was scrolling through social media when I got a text from his boss. It was a simple, "Thank you for the delicious dinner," but it made my heartbeat go really fast. I replied to him that it was my pleasure, and that was the end of the conversation. As I looked to the side and saw my sleeping husband, I felt a pang of guilt for crushing on his boss, but I couldn't help it. It wasn't that anything was going to happen between us. It was just a silly crush, I told myself as I went to sleep. After a few days, I got a text from my husband's boss while my husband was in the office. He told me that he loved pie and needed the recipe. I shared it with him, but our conversation didn't end there. He kept making small talk to me, and I also engaged in that conversation with him. At that point, it didn't seem like I was doing something wrong. I just felt that I was having a friendly conversation with my husband's boss. We kept exchanging texts all the time. He was really witty and charming. It was nice to talk to someone like this, especially since I didn't talk to my husband like this anymore. It was a bittersweet feeling, but we kept talking. My husband was so busy with work that he didn't even notice that my attention was completely somewhere else, and for the first time I wasn't bothered by his lack of attention to me. I kept texting his boss usually when my husband was in the office. I found it weird that my husband couldn't make time for me, but his boss could. I thought that maybe I wasn't just a priority to my husband. Days passed like this. I was going to the mall one day to go shopping. When I asked my husband for money before he left for his office, He gave me just a few hundred and said that we should save money right now as we have to pay the home debt and everything. It was really irritating. Every time I asked him for something, he would tell me that we should save and list me some different expenses. I didn't say anything to him and went to the mall. I bumped into my husband's boss there. I didn't tell him that I was going to be here, so it was a surprise. He asked me what I was getting, and I just shrugged and told him that I was window shopping. He told me that he was bored as well and just came here to pass the time. He asked me if I wanted to hang out together. I nodded at him and we went to random stores just laughing and enjoying each other's company. My eyes fell on a limited edition LV bag. It was way off my budget, so I just looked with desire and longing but then kept it back. The boss had noticed it and told me to get the bag. I laughed and told him that I can't. He told me to get the bag and that he will take care of it. I couldn't accept such an expensive bag from him, and I told him the same. He then started talking to the salesperson and then bought the bag. I just kept staring at him in shock as he gave his card and bought the bag, which was worth $3,000. I was shocked that was doing that for me. I was also really impressed as spending such a big amount wasn't a big thing for me, whereas my husband kept fretting when he had to give a few $100. He then gave me the bag and told me it was a thank you from his side for dinner the other day. I was still in shock about everything. I came from a middle-class family. I wasn't used to this type of lavish purposes. I came from a family where we discussed the smallest expenses and only made it when it was absolutely necessary. My crush on him had intensified that day. I was still in a daze when I entered my house with that bag. My husband noticed the huge bag in my hand and asked me what I got. I showed him the bag, but instead of getting happy like I expected him to, he started asking all these questions about how much money I spent in that bag and where I got the money. I got irritated and then decided it's better to not tell him the truth. I told him that it wasn't expensive and I had thrifted it from a thrift store. He was confused as to whether he should believe me or not, but then finally believed me. He said that it made sense and where will I get the money to buy the bag directly from the store? I nodded at him and then took my bag to my closet and kept it properly. I didn't talk to him about anything further related to the bag. He got busy with his work again, and I started texting his boss. I told him that it was really thoughtful of him to give me the bag. We used to text each other back and forth throughout the day. At that point, it seemed like he knew me more than my husband does. That was because he actually gave me time, unlike my husband who had neither time nor money. I immediately felt bad for having this thought. The boss had a lot of interest in my hobbies and how I spent my time alone at home. Everything I told him, he listened with interest. My husband had called me on a Monday to tell me that his boss had asked him to go out to town for a work meeting that night. He came home and packed his bag and then left for the airport. I was alone that night and was in my bed texting his boss about my day and stuff. We had become sort of friends at this point. He was 30 years old and single and lived alone in his fancy apartment. He was funny and charming and really attractive. He asked me that since I was alone, we could have dinner together the next day. I didn't need much convincing and agreed instantly. I couldn't wait to see where he would take me for dinner. Me and my husband only ate at home and rarely took takeouts because that was cheaper than going and having dinner in the restaurants. I never got the chance to dress fancy, but I felt that I was finally getting my chance to enjoy everything. When my husband called me the next day to ask how things were at home, I told him everything was fine. I was confused as to whether to tell him that I was going for dinner with his boss or not. I decided it's better to not share that with him. He would have asked too many questions, and I wasn't ready for those questions at that point of time. I got ready just in time as the doorbell rang, and the boss was standing on the door waiting for me. We got to his car and made our way to the restaurant. He took me for dinner at a very high-class restaurant. I had expected that. We were taken to a secluded booth which gave us privacy. I didn't know how to feel about the situation. I was sitting in a top-rated restaurant in the city with my husband's boss. I decided to not overthink and just go with the flow. He ordered me wine, and after a few drinks, we started flirting with each other more directly than we did on texts. It was refreshing to experience this with him. My husband used to flirt with me before we got married, but then responsibilities took over and the romance took a back seat. That night, flirting was on the front seat again, and I loved every second of it. I was tipsy, and I don't know what came over me as I went to his side of the booth and then kissed him on the cheeks. We suddenly kissed each with lots of passion, and it seemed so good. I had never in my dreams thought about kissing someone in such a fancy place. After some time, as I realized what I was doing, I pulled back from him. It hit me what I had done. I started feeling guilt for going behind my husband's back like this. Boss started comforting me, telling me it was okay, and I had done nothing wrong. The way he comforted me made me more emotional, and I hugged him again. He then took me to his house. He knew that I was attracted to him, and I knew he was attracted to me as well. That night, I slept with him. I had thought to not think about the consequences and enjoy this small, good part of my life. My husband called me while I was at my boss's house only. He told me that he was going to the airport and would be home by the evening. I told him that I can't wait for him to come back to me. I then cursed myself for telling that to him. We didn't like that to each other anymore. Even if he didn't know that something was wrong before, he would know now. I facepalmed myself and then started to get ready to get back to my home. I didn't think that I was going to meet the boss again. I had only thought that it was a one-night thing. I smiled at him as I didn't want things to get awkward and then made my way to exit his house. But then he stopped me before I could leave. He asked me when he would see me again. I was confused as to what he was trying to ask. He repeated then that he wanted to see and that one night wasn't enough. I felt happy that he wanted me like that, but I was also confused as to how I could do this behind my husband's back without him finding out about this. I voiced my concern to him, and he told me that I need not worry about anything. He will make sure that my husband doesn't get to know. I believed him because I also wanted to meet him again. I knew I was doing the wrong thing, but I couldn't control myself. I wanted this man a lot. He told me that he will make plans for us and let me know via text. He kissed me again, and then I left for my home. My husband came back in the evening just as I was done cooking his favorite pasta for him. He seemed happy. He told me that his work has gone really well and he can soon expect a promotion. I was happy for him, but in my head I was thinking, will he be able to treat me like his boss does even after getting promotion? I was so confused as to what I was doing in my life. Was I making a mistake, or I was grabbing the lifetime opportunity of having fun and enjoying the luxuries that I was not going to get with my husband? I didn't let my doubts change my decision. I deserved to have fun. So I started seeing my husband's boss behind his back. He would text me the location, and I would meet him there while my husband was at work. His boss made sure that my husband was stacked with work so we could get enough time together. I felt a little bad that he was so occupied from work because of my selfish desires. But then the boss told me that my husband liked to work. He was enjoying it. I knew that was true because he liked spending more time at work than with me. I let the guilt go and enjoyed the moments. Boss always had some or other expensive gift for me. It was like he knew what was going to make me happy. Sometimes he would get me makeup and skincare from celebrity brands. Sometimes he would just randomly take me to stores like Dior and let me pick whatever I wanted. I thrived on his attention. I couldn't remember the last time I was so happy in my life. I made sure that I hid all the gifts in the closet so that my husband would never find out about them. I had no explanation if he ever came to find out about that. Boss took care of all my needs. Everything I wanted, he made sure I got. I made sure that we were happy in the bedroom. Me and my husband had stopped getting away before I started my affair, so he didn't doubt anything when I started my affair. I finally thought that this could be my ideal life. I had stopped fighting with my husband because there was no need anymore. I was getting those things from both. Everything was finally okay in our life. I didn't get affected when my husband put all his attention to his work. He didn't get angry at me anymore because I had stopped complaining. It was the idle life I had wanted, but it all got ruined until I had to face reality and come to terms with what I had done. One day while I was in the kitchen in the morning, my husband asked if I had seen his blue tie. I had kept it somewhere in the closet but didn't exactly remember where. I told him to look for it in the closet itself. I went back to making breakfast when I heard him coming downstairs with a luxury brand bag. He asked me what this Dior scarf was doing in my closet. I was completely shocked at his question. It had totally slipped my mind that I had hidden my gifts in the closet when I asked him to look there. I started thinking of a lie on the spot, and then eventually told him that it belonged to a friend of mine. She had just told me to keep it here since it's very expensive. She was moving houses and didn't want it to get damaged or lost. He believed me, and then I took the bag from him and told him that I'll keep it back and get his tie on the way back as well. I immediately went and checked if he had seen any other bags, but fortunately for me, it was only this bag. I thought of hiding the gifts somewhere else later. It slipped my mind again to hide the gifts as I got busy with other things. One day, me and the boss were going to a very exclusive VIP event. He had been invited and I was going there as his plus one. I had told my husband that I was going to meet my friend and will help her in packing as she is shifting to a new house. I had told him that it will get late, so I'll spend the night there and then come back home the next day. He told me it was fine to take care. I got dressed in a very beautiful Chanel dress. I couldn't believe my luck. A few months ago, I was window shopping at the mall because I couldn't afford anything, and now I am getting dressed in Chanel. The evening was beautiful. There were many photographers. It was a gallery opening of a celebrity artist, and various celebrities were attending it as well. There were various photographers as well. I didn't pay attention to anything then. Just enjoyed the evening. I wasn't used to being in places with such high-profile people. I then went with the boss to his home and spent the night there with him. I got back home the next day around noon thinking that my husband would be in the office. I didn't expect to find my husband sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. I asked in a casual tone why he didn't go to the office as I made my way to the kitchen to make some coffee for myself. I heard him telling me that he was waiting for me. I thought it was weird, but let it go. He then asked me how my night was. I told him it was nice. I lied to him as to how I helped my friend packing up everything, etc., etc. By the time my story had finished, my husband had come to the kitchen. He looked like he was angry, but I couldn't understand why. I asked him what's wrong, and then he showed me the newspaper where there was a picture of me in his boss's arms. It was from the gallery. The picture was really small, but it was clear that it was me and him. I looked to my husband to tell him something about how it wasn't true, but the anger in his eyes shut me up. He then went and brought all the bags that I had hidden in the closet. I even forget to take the bill out of them. All those bills were signed to his boss. I was literally screwed. My husband got even more angry after that. He told me how I didn't think that I would go so low just for fame and money. He then asked me harshly if I was sleeping with his boss. I had tears in my eyes. There wasn't any point in denying the truth, so I just nodded and kept crying. He looked like he was hurt for a bit, but then told me to get out of his house. He said that he never wants to see my lying face. I tried to go closer to him to hug him and apologize to him, but he stepped back and crossed his arms. He left the house and told me that he wanted me gone by the time he got back home. I called up the boss in tears. I was going to ask him if I could stay over at his place for a few days, but a woman picked up his phone. I asked her who she was, and she told me that she was his fiancée. That was a shock to my system. He had told me that he was single and lived alone in the city. The woman on the line must have known who I was, as she started calling me names for sleeping with her fiancé. I couldn't believe what she was telling me. After getting yelled at, I ended the call. I didn't know what the fuck to do anymore since I had lost my husband and my house and had no place to go. Boss had also lied to me. I had no idea he had a fiancé. I wasn't going to get homeless. I sat in my living room and thought that I was going to convince my husband to forgive me. I had believed that once he gets to know the circumstances which led to everything, he will forgive me, and we would be able to start a new phase of life from that point. I waited anxiously for him to come back home. He came back home after 3 to 4 hours with bloody knuckles. I asked him what had happened, but he didn't reply to me. He looked at me with murder in his eyes and asked me why I was still there. I went to get the first aid box and came to him, but when I touched his shoulder, he pushed me away and then started telling me how everything was fucked up for me. He told me that he had gone to see his boss and punched him. He then told me how he had a fiancé. He laughed when he saw my face in confusion. "The player got played, huh?" he said sarcastically. He told me how his fiancé was living in Canada and they were doing long distance. He then revealed the whole truth that his fiancé had also seen the picture and came here to talk to him. "She will take him back and you will have nowhere to go," he said in an angry whisper. I asked him if she could take him back. Why couldn't he take me back? He then laughed and told me because he wasn't stupid like her. My husband had talked to his boss's fiancée and even convinced her to forgive his fiancée. He knew that if she forgave him, he would end everything with me. He said that he wasn't stupid, that he would end things with me and would keep the option open that I could go with his boss. He then scanned all the bags and looked me in the eye. He told me that I had cheated on him for all this only. He then laughed as my phone rang. His boss was calling me. My husband told me to pick it up. Boss told me that his fiancée gave all the gifts back, so I should send it back to their home. I was shocked but didn't know what else to do. My husband kept smirking at me. I went to my closet and picked out all the gifts that he had given me. My husband was waiting in the living room when I came back. He told me that he had already called the lawyer and soon the divorce proceedings will start. I begged him to give me another chance, but he didn't listen to me. He told me that I was the worst person on this planet and to leave the house immediately. I packed a bag and then left the house. I went to a friend's place. She let me stay in her house for a few nights, but then her husband came back from the trip and she told me it was best that I left her house. Even my closest friend didn't trust me to be around her husband anymore. I then left the house and went to my parents' place. They weren't talking to me as my husband had told them the truth, but they let me stay there for a short while. My husband's lawyers contacted me soon and told me about the divorce proceedings. I started looking for a job, but it was hard to find one since I had no experience. I got married immediately after college. I felt like I had suddenly been in the lowest phase of my life. Just because of greed and desire, I lost one of the most important relationships of my life. The divorce process began, and it was done quite quickly. I expected it to be dragged through a year. I had hoped that maybe within this year, I could seek the forgiveness of my husband. But all hope went to vain, as the process only took 3 months. Even in those 3 months, my husband made sure to have minimum contact with me. His lawyers handled everything from his end, whereas my lawyers represented my side. The court didn't grant me any substantial alimony. All the facts were in favor of my husband, and his lawyers knew what they were doing. My lawyers couldn't do anything. I had already lost everything. My husband, my marriage. I didn't even get to be with my affair partner thanks to my husband. It was all my fault. I cannot blame my husband for what had happened to me, because what he was doing was just a reaction to my actions. Update. It's been a year since my last post. I see all your comments. I know it was my mistake. I was so young back then that I thought I was missing out on my life by being with my husband. I thought that his hard work and struggle was not of any importance, and I realize now how stupid that was. I have taken a job as a nanny. It doesn't pay well, but it's something which is better than nothing. I shifted to a studio apartment in the not-so-good location of the city. I feel like I have lost hope of anything good happening to me now. I have become the wife who slept with husband's boss just because she wanted expensive gifts. Everyone who knows what has happened looks at me with disgust in their eyes. I just keep my head down in shame, my heart filled with guilt for what I have done. My ex-husband, on the other hand, is doing really well. He got a promotion at work. He wears expensive suits now. He's on the ladder of success while I'm on the road to hell. I've heard from someone that he had also started dating someone really hot. I feel happy for him even though I'm sad for myself. I could have been that woman beside him enjoying all the luxuries if I had patience to stick with him in his struggling times. He deserves all the success that is coming his way. He deserved every bit of it, while I deserve all the hurt and feeling of shame I feel every day. Thank you everyone for listening till here.
Hey there guys. I've been keeping this down for a long time now. It has been almost 10 years since this happened, and I think it's now time I start to tell my story. This might get pretty long because all the events that I'm about to narrate have long occurred, so that means that unlike most of the stories I normally read on this Reddit, there won't be updates. My ex-wife betrayed me and I lost my marbles. Some time ago, I was married to a lady named Caroline. She was a career-driven lady and one of those strong independent women who only cared about her career. She wasn't always like that. I don't know, something about the job she got after we got married made her like that. We got married young. She was 24 and I was 27. We decided to hold off on having kids because we wanted to spend a few years enjoying each other's company. I had suggested it and she agreed because she thought we weren't yet mature enough to handle raising kids. We decided to wait until we were married 5 years. She got that job 2 years into our marriage. I remember her first day at work. She came back so happy and full of immense admiration for her coworkers. She couldn't stop telling me everything she had learned from the first day at the office. What did she tell? Well, let's start from the fact that it was a female-dominated workspace, which I didn't really care much about until she said they wanted to make it a female-only thing, but they needed the men to run the things they couldn't. Things that were heavy-duty. I thought that was weird, seeing her joke about how her coworkers spent most of their lunch break shitting men. I get women empowerment and all, but that seemed to me like taking it too far. Due to that, I started to get a feeling that I wouldn't like her stay at the company. I also knew that it would be almost impossible to persuade her to quit working there if my fears ever became reality. Though I had my takebacks, I was really happy for her. She finally got to work a job she wanted and had dreamt of. I hated the way she was miserable during the year she worked as a teacher, and I was happy she had gotten something that made her happy to wake up each passing day. The weeks passed, with her getting more enthusiastic about her work life with each passing day. I won't lie, I started to get a little jealous. Not a lot of people were still giggy about working for more than 2 months. There's always the initial, "I love working here" stage, but I didn't always last that long. Mine sure didn't. Her joy about work was nice, meant we got to get freaky in the other room often, which was wild. She never had any complaints about her work, except for a few customers being customers, which was something I was happy was going right for her. Now the other thing I didn't like about where she worked started to rear its head. Most of the workers were career-driven feminists who were all single past the age of 35. I felt that at the age of 23, she was way too young and could potentially be malleable or brainwashed into thinking that she made a mistake marrying early. Also, I hoped that she didn't start to model their single lifestyle, because she looked up to a lot of them. Now the funny thing is, the conversations she had with them, at least the ones I knew of, mostly centered around their careers. They also had conversations about other things though, but they mostly spoke about how they wanted to grow their business to the highest of heights. She told me a lot of things about them, how her boss, a 49-year-old woman as of then, always told her next step was this, or that other one, which were all always something about making more money and becoming the most popular or influential person that bore her name. I don't remember the name, but my ex-wife always said the name with so much respect then. Well, slowly they started to tell her things and she started to listen. She started to want to be like these women. She wanted to become an influential person herself. I tried to talk to her, to tell her that I loved her ambition, but those women weren't women she should aspire to be like. I tried to talk to her, show her more influential women, who were able to make names for themselves while still being in a committed relationship. Funny enough, they always talked her up for being the youngest, but still the only one who was married. There were days when she would come back more excited than normal, because a coworker, one of whom she looked up to, had told her she'd happily swap lives with her. So it seemed they all wanted to get married someday, but one thing that most of the women didn't want was, you guessed, kids. She had started dropping subtle hints that she didn't want kids now. I knew it was because of her work environment. The only people who had kids were the people who did the maintenance, IT and other stuff. The women who worked with the main team, which she was a part of, didn't. At this point, we were drawing closer to the time we gave before we started to try for kids. I paid no mind to whatever hints and signs she dropped and decided that she'd either tell me herself or we move on as planned. After our 5th anniversary, we talked about her going off birth control. She disagreed. I laughed, to be honest, but I didn't find anything funny about her disagreement. She told me a lot of things that her group of undesirables had said to her about having kids, how the only thing the man had to worry about was the initial, which the men liked. Every other thing was on the women. She talked on and on about how she felt bringing a child into the world was only going to slow her pace. At this point, she had already started climbing up the corporate ladder. It was disheartening to see the woman I loved, who was always a mom, who always loved nurturing, who wanted to have kids before we even got married, turn into something like this, something I couldn't explain in just 3 years of working at that place. The bunch of undesirables, as I started calling her coworkers, had indoctrinated her with their undesirable ideas. They had turned my woman into your average deluded feminist. What was worse? She cited the fact that she was the one who earned the bulk of the money we spent and the money we had in our joint account. Low blow that was, if you ask me. We talked about this for several months. She had started telling me the things her mates at the office were telling her, that I was unknowingly becoming a part of the problem, that I couldn't see past my patriarchal instincts which were meant to oppress women. There's no way she thought me wanting kids was oppression, was what I thought. Unknown to me, this woman was already far gone. This conversation went on for a longer period of time than I expected. It took her a few months, but on my birthday, November the 27th, 12 years ago, she brought her birthday gift to me. She had gone off birth control. I was happy, really happy. It was now time for me to make little McLean babies. Unknown to me, that was where the evil deeds started. We tried for 2 years for a baby. At this point, if I was given just one child, I'd have bitten the hand off of whoever offered it. We went to different family clinics, met with different fertility experts, and did tests on each other. Deep down, I thought I was being punished for being an absolute player in 7 years from 17 till 24 when I first met Caroline. I had gone to see a urologist, just to be sure I was even able to get a woman pregnant. She went to see the people she would see to get a fertility test done, or at least that was what she told me. When we got results, we were both really fertile, and the specialists only said we should try more so that it would surely happen. Hey, more sex. I'll take what I can get. Over the next 2 years, we still got no results. Then unfortunately, and also fortunately for me, she got involved in an accident, a fatal accident that claimed the lives of several of her coworkers as they went on a convention in another state. I was chilling at home that day. 'Twas a Saturday evening, so I was back home from working. She wasn't home, so everywhere was extremely quiet. I was sitting in the living room doing nothing at all, just sitting. You men know how soul-pleasing a quiet house is. I got a call from a hospital in the state where she was. She was involved in an accident and was one of the few who they got to on time and were saved. I was told she was put on life support but needed to be operated on before the next 3 days, or she might not make it. I rushed down to the hospital with every possible thing that I thought would be needed. It took me till 10 a.m. the next day to get there, but I didn't stop driving until I got to the hospital, driving for more than 12 hours straight. Immediately I got there, I rushed to the where I met my ex-wife. Seeing her in that state, it was pretty hard to contain myself. The thoughts of losing her taunted me. I was scared. I handed whatever documents the hospital needed and they started the surgery. 2 days later she was stable, she could talk and all. I stayed by her side at the hospital all through the days. We were talking and laughing when the doctor came in to check on her, as he did at least once a day. As he made to leave, I asked when she'd be discharged. He responded saying, "Very soon, I just need to prescribe some medication and checkups at the hospital where you live, but before that I'd need to know if there's anything that could affect the medication I'd be prescribing. We don't want to accidentally cripple or even worse, do in a patient we just spent 12 hours in the operating room with." "Anything like what?" Caroline asked. "You know, things like ulcer, pregnancy, diabetes, and aborted pregnancies. Anything that may have not been in the medical history." "No," I responded. "There are no health obstructions." The doctor said okay and headed out of the room. He didn't make it out the door when my ex-wife called him back. "Wait," she said. "There is something." The doctor turned and walked back towards us, asking to hear what it was. She looked at me. I could see in her face that she was afraid to say whatever it was she wanted to say. She hesitated a little, then I nudged her to say what it was. "I had an abortion last week." "Hold on a minute, what?" I didn't even know when I had shouted this out. "Please don't stream the patient, you don't want to risk us having a setback." I controlled myself. The doctor took notes and left. It was now my turn to ask the questions. "What do you mean you had an abortion?" "You had an abortion when we were desperately trying to have kids for 2 years? What made you make such a decision without talking to me first?" She started crying, saying she never wanted me to find out this way. That wasn't what I asked her. I told her to answer only the questions I asked, nothing more. She started to talk about the years she spent at the company. She talked about the fact that the women she walked with were all against having children, how they didn't want anyone to be dependent on them. She told me how they called children leeches, parasites. She told me how she had told them about our fights, and how one of them suggested she agree with me but get abortions behind my back. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. She said the lady told her that she might only have to do it once and that I might give up after trying for 6 months to a year. I was really disappointed at her. Are these really the people she looked up to? How many? I asked her. She shook her head, saying she didn't want to answer, that I'd leave her if she said how many. I looked at this lady, at this murderer. I asked again, how many? She shook her head, saying, no, 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 no. How many? 7. She said, finally caving. Wow, 7. 7 abortions. All the while she watched me blame myself for us not being able to have kids, and all the while we could have had maybe 2 kids running around the crib. Wow. I walked out of the hospital. As I headed home, I thought about the whole thing. It took me 17 hours to get back home, as I used that time to think about the whole thing. I imagined having 7 children running around my house. I closed all my windows and screamed for a long time, hoping I'd scream away the pain. After successfully giving myself a headache, I calmed down. I decided I needed to get back at her. The only reasonable thing that came to mind was to ruin the career she willingly killed my kids to have. I remembered her telling me once about how the company was evading tax the whole time they existed. She had briefed me on how they did it, and because she was now CFM, Chief Financial Manager, she was actively involved in it all. I knew what I had to do. When I got home, I went straight for her keys and headed to her office. Since the majority of the undesirables were a part of the accident and those who weren't were at the convention, I took my chance. I went for all the files I could find that could serve as tangible proof of their tax evasion, like records of monthly profits, budgets, anything I came across that seemed like evidence, I took. I scanned copies and saved them on my device. Then I called my lawyer, told him how things were. I evenly shared the money in the joint account and I left the house to her. I didn't even know what to do there anymore. Everything in there reminded me of her. By the end of the week, it was all ready. The IRS had been alerted and proof presented to them. The divorce papers were ready. I went out to meet my realtor to find a better place to move into. The time I had spent there was already too much. By the time I had gotten home, Caroline was back from the hospital. She got up and rushed to me when she saw me. I put my hand out at a stop sign. I don't want to hear whatever it is you have to say. The papers on the table are divorce papers. You've been served. Henceforth, we will only be conversing via our lawyers, I said to her. She tried to beg me, tried to explain herself, but I wasn't having it. I went straight to the room, reached for my bag of clean clothes, and headed right out. I only stopped at the door to say these last words to her. Listen, love, you should be ashamed of yourself. You broke my trust and went against nature, all because of your stupid career. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I've alerted the IRS, so I hope your company has made a ton of profit, because you better call Saul. I hope you regret the decision you made, and I hope that whenever you look in the mirror you see yourself for who you really are. A murderer. I left again. This time for good. I slept at my office for a week before I was able to find a new place that was within my price range and mortgage plan. In 2 months our divorce was final. Just a day after we were officially divorced, I heard on the local news radio about an all-female company being busted for tax evasion. Yes. Giving karma time to do its job. Do it yourself. I didn't really follow the court proceedings. Hell, I was there only twice, the day I was called on as a witness and the day of the sentencing. The case took 2 years. I dressed in a 2-piece suit, like the meme, dressed for my enemy's downfall. I wanted her to know that I did this to her, and I was there to watch her hopes and dreams burn before her eyes. They took everything from here, even down to the house I left her. The company was shut down completely as they couldn't afford to recount all those years of unpaid taxes, and she, as the manager of finance, and her boss, the COO, were both sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. As she was escorted out of the court, our eyes met and I had my best evil smile on as I then flipped her off. She bowed her head and I saw a drop of tear fall from her eyes. Look who had the last laugh. Me. I got a call later on, 4 years ago, from an unknown number. It was her. She said she had got out close to 4 months ago and that she wanted to make amends. We met at a KFC on a Saturday evening and talked about everything. She talked about how, when she first started working with the company, she had never seen so many made women in one gathering, how she always thought before then that her biggest achievement was being Mrs. McLean, and how she wanted to be more than just a wife. She said she started seeing a common denominator amongst the women, which was that they were all never married nor did they have kids. She said she thought in order to make it she had to be like them, and that since she was already married the only other thing was to not have children. She saw how they openly condemned having kids and how they said their lives were much better because they didn't have any parasites latching onto them. She said she hated herself for being so naive and impressionable. She didn't have to say it, it was evident in her appearance, posture, and her body. I had noticed some scars and her hands, although she tried to hide them by wearing long sleeves. She said when she got out, she went over to a friend from the office, that what she was when she got there made her hate herself even more. She said the lady was now married with 2 kids aged 4 and 1, and she also had another on the way. She told me that when they had started talking, she had told her how she only remained working there because the pay was good and the benefits even better. The friend of hers told Caroline that she was already engaged to be married and had planned to resign as soon as she got married, until the company was shut down, that is. Caroline went on to talk about what she said was the most painful part of it all. When she asked about the lady who gave her the abortion advice, the lady told her that after the company got shut down by the government she left the country. She said that they had still kept in touch until the lady told her that she was pregnant, aged 41. Caroline told me that her friend from work got angry at the lady who had given the abortion advice, stating that she had given someone advice that helped ruin her marriage only for her to decide she was going to have children, the same children she strongly advised against. She showed me a recording of the words of the lady who gave her the advice. I played it and it went like so, not word for word because it's been a long time, but this was basically what the lady in the recording said. I was really envious of Carl. She was the youngest and still somehow was the one who had life figured out the most. It was a good thing she was such a naive lady. Most of us were miserable. Yes, we were rich, but what good is having all the money in this world if you had no one to share it with? I gave her that advice in hopes that her husband would find out. Not only was she married, but she was married to a literal knight in shining armor. I laughed, to be honest. These were the women she wanted to be like, sad, pathetic, and miserable women. These were the women she betrayed me. I looked at her. She was now like those women, although now she wasn't as rich as they were, she didn't even have anything. I laughed because of how sad it was. She asked about me, how my life was, if I had remarried. I told her that I wasn't. Her eyes lit up for the first time that day. She probably thought we still had a chance. I shut that hope down quickly. Told her I was finally happy, that I had finally moved on. I told her I wished her the best in all her endeavors. I really did. I thought she had suffered enough already. She tried to plead with me to remain in contact, to be friends, so we can see where that led. She told me she still loved me. She said she couldn't stop thinking about what I told her that day I left the house. She had started crying at this point. To be fair, she cried a lot during the conversation. I told her to forget about us rekindling what we had, that was never going to happen, that I don't see the woman I loved anymore, and that I had moved on in the time she had spent in jail. I told her I could help her back on her feet. Moving on was hard. Sometimes when I sleep, I dream about those 7 kids, a dream where they had names, a life, and a future. I have 1 child now, adopted. I'm serious about never getting married again. He's a real gem. God gave me the opportunity to choose a child this time, and I chose right. His 10th birthday was just yesterday, and he was the reason why I decided to tell the world my story. Thank you guys for reading this. I love the life I've built for myself since I left her. I'm happy now, my son makes me happy.